Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We are coming to you from New York City, representing DreamYard in the Bronx. My name is Lisa Green, and I'm the director of the Dance and Music Department. I've been with DreamYard for 11 years now, and for the last 2 to 3 years, I have been on the documentation team, highlighting our learning community work, and we'll learn more about that work in a moment, but I'd like to share a little bit about DreamYard and who we are. DreamYard Project collaborates with youth, families, and schools to build pathways to equity and opportunity in the arts. Our free programming is nationally recognized, and opportunities include performing arts, visual arts, audio and visual production, gaming, maker, and entrepreneurship, all focused on fostering the creative development of young change agents. By offering sustained and meaningful support along their educational pathway, our youth develop the tools necessary to become creative and engaged citizens, lifelong learners, and innovators of the 21st century. And now I'd like to turn it over to my co-host for their intro.
Awesome, thank you, Lisa. My name is Joselina Faye. I am the Associate Director of the DreamYard Arts Center. The Arts Center is our Arts and Social Justice Community Center based in the Morrisania section of the Bronx. And today we wanted to take some time to dive deeper into one of the pillars of our professional development programs here at DreamYard, our DreamYard Learning Community. Our learning community, commonly known in DreamYard as LC, is a year-long peer-led social justice conversation that allows our full-time administrative staff to learn together. We do this by building community and exploring how past injustices can inform our current work in order to imagine a better future for our communities. This space places a special focus on learning and developing strategies to address race and racism, both within the organization and in the work we do externally. Over the course of this episode, you will learn more about how our learning community started and how it has developed over the years. We hope to be able to share some lessons we have learned and how to develop racial equity strategies within our nonprofit work.
Hi, I'm Rajeeyah Finnie-Myers. I've been at DreamYard for about 7 years, and currently I am the Director of Professional Development. I've been a part of the Learning Community Steering Committee since 2015. And I took on a more leadership role on the steering committee in 2016. As an artist and an arts administrator, I consider myself an organizer, a dreamer, a truth teller. I very much believe in healing and consider myself a part of that work. And that is who I am. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a sister friend, daughter, sister, all those things.
Hi, I'm Natalia Torres. I'm currently the Department Director for Visual Art and Maker at DreamYard. I joined DreamYard a little less than 4 years ago as a school programs coordinator and have been on the Learning Community Steering Committee for the last 3 years. As an artist, I'm a printmaker and poet. I'm also a plant lover and baking enthusiast.
My name is Kolos. I'm the Director of Digital Learning at DreamYard. I've been at DreamYard somewhere between 8 and 9 years. And have been on the Learning Community Steering Committee since it began. My work really lies at the intersection of technology, education, and the arts, and I've been doing that for about 20 years, first as a teaching artist, and then now more as a program administrator. I have a background in documentary filmmaking, but also do a lot of crafting, crocheting, and knitting, making all kinds of concoctions, and I'm also a DJ on the side.
I can start us off and welcome other people to chime in because I know there are a lot of details that we have each experienced differently. But my understanding of learning community, LC, started with, I think back in 2014, DreamYard bringing in Rachel Ibrahim and Monica Denisse, two facilitators who were with us to offer us a foundational anti-racism training as a DY administrative staff. The training was based on the People's Institute of Survival and Beyond's principles of undoing racism, which is a 2.5-day workshop that they offer throughout the country and that many of us had already taken. The training concluded with an invitation from our facilitators to keep up our work. As we know, the work doesn't end, it's ongoing, and there's no certification, so to speak, in the work. So with that, we had our assistant director at the time of professional development for in-school programs, Renee Watson, lead the administrative staff in a debriefing of the experience. And the conversation resulted in a few key takeaways. The one being that a core team of Alma Kojo, Renee Watson, Jason Duchin, and Tim Lord, our co-executive directors, would meet and kind of discuss how the work could continue and be supported by the organization. And from that discussion, the group decided to continue through our staff meetings. These sessions were initiated and would be led by Alma and Renee in the beginning, and the staff then discussed how white staff members could be more a part of the conversation and could take some accountability on how to continue to lead the charge and change with their own accountability. So those were the two main points that came out of that conversation and that invitation. And it kind of led us to where we are today with the learning community. I think the first learning community started in the fall of 2014 and was, like I said, a part of our monthly staff meetings, and then continued from there and took on many different iterations and I guess structures when it came to the approach of how we did the work. But I think at the heart of it, we agreed that it would center the conversation of race.
As somebody who's kind of newer to the learning community structure, and that I wasn't around when it first started, I think something that I've seen that feels really good is that it's like a living space. It's not stagnant. And we're able to really evolve and change based on the needs of the community. And I think that that's something that like feels really good for me, where people actually like have feedback about what it looks like and we could change it so it doesn't necessarily have to be a certain way. So yeah, it's like it's good to hear the evolution of it because it really has evolved, and I think.
Every year, at the end of the year, the steering committee sends out a survey to the whole staff to get feedback on what the experience is like and if there are things that they want to talk about in the future. And we use that feedback in our planning for the coming year. So every summer, the steering committee meets and we kind of reflect on what the previous year looked like and think about what the structure will look like going forward. From there, we come up with a theme and related topics that we'll go over each month. And for the past couple of years, we still have worked closely with Alma Kojo, who leads us in deep dives on the topics every month. And most recently, the structure has looked like a few members of the steering committee kind of take on that topic, and we'll use the information from the deep dive to kind of create the structure for that month's facilitation and that month's session. And more recently, we've done kind of like those folks will do test runs with the steering committee to get feedback on how the sessions are working. And for the last 2 years, folks have been working on racial justice projects, which came directly from feedback from the staff about wanting some of the work in LC to feel more actionable and more tangible.
I think one thing that it does well, in addition to being responsive to what the staff is saying is needed, is that it kind of serves as an assessment of where we truly are. It's one of the very few times that we as an organizational administrative staff are all in the same room together doing work together, and we're not kind of separated by the type of work that we do. So we have the finance department in the same room as HR, in the same room as programs, in the same room as executive directors, in the same room as facilities manager. All of us are on the same plane of learning together and from each other. So I think that in itself is a success for us as an organization. I think that's one of the challenges we face often in the different ways that we work, is how can we see each other and be able to communicate with each other. I also think that in the beginning, my experience of learning community was about educating ourselves. So there was somewhat of a political education going on and an understanding of the history of race in this country that really put us all on similar planes, knowing that we each had different racialized experiences and socialization based on our identity. us being able to learn that history together and explore that history together really, for me personally, changed the way that I moved through DreamYard, to be able to be in those vulnerable spaces and understand that we carry a lot of history around violence and just injustice in this country, and how we were all at the hands of a system that is not necessarily benefiting us, really helps us to look at the work that we do together differently. So for me, that's been really moving. And now we're moving, as Natalia mentioned, away a little bit from that understanding history and giving ourselves context to why we're even talking about race in the first place, to action. But I still can see that some of those same qualities are still there in the room, of us learning together, us understanding that our experience in the organization varies based on who we are and what our roles are.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just tag on and say that even for me, learning community has been I've never experienced anything like it. And I think it allowed me to get deeper into the work. It allowed me to see my colleagues in a new way, and just feel that we're all in it together and know that we're learning as much as we can together, and just moving through whatever, ups and downs kind of take place within the society, within our own organization. So I feel that it really transformed the way I move at DreamYard and outside of DreamYard.
And I think to add on to what Lisa was just saying, I think it is a very special space. And I think, when you tell folks that our staff meeting is a time where we, for 3 hours once a month, dedicate as a whole community to talking about race and working and learning together, people are really surprised often. And I think it's important to know and to remember how important that space is, and the act of learning together and working to disrupt and dismantle systems of oppression is really important.
So I think Rajeeyah mentioned it earlier, is that real focus on race, because this came out of our conversations about racial equity at DreamYard, and not just like our outward work, but also internally, how we work with each other and the structures in our own organization. So although that's always kind of been there, I do think it has been a challenge to keep that focus. And I think Rajeeyah and other folks have always reminded us too. We've sometimes at the beginning of the year, we need that reminder, because there's so many other types of oppression we could be talking about. And I think after a few years, we also became more mindful about intersectionality and the intersections with other oppressions, leading up to this year, where we focused on Black queer feminism by reading Unapologetic by Charlene Carruthers together. Another one is just balancing participation. We've gone back and forth with a couple different models. Learning community steering has, the committee has always been there, and that's kind of fluctuated probably between 8 and 12 people. And so we, on the committee, do most of the planning. And in the beginning, I think we were doing more of the facilitation, but then we decided it would help others on the staff to join in facilitation and would help them learn. And then we've kind of pulled back from that too at times, because everybody is coming with different experiences around facilitation and comfort levels with that. So finding that balance of where we can get everyone engaged, but also and keep them on their growing edge, but also not overwhelm folks and be aware of where they're coming from. And then I would say maybe just 2 more things. Self-care and incorporating supportive practices. And that could be anything from we do coloring sheets now. We have little things that you can hold in your hands. We're really thoughtful about setting up the space, including art making when we can, and healing moments at the end, because these topics are heavy and also affect people in different ways. And they're emotional, right? And I think we're not used to being emotional at work. Maybe at DreamYard we are a little bit more, but not everybody is. And it's very personal. And so having to create those spaces for self-care in the beginning, middle, and end is very important. And lastly, I'll just say one of the biggest challenges, we've only had a couple moments where we've done racial affinity groups. So we've had white folks go into one room and people of color in the other room. And there's a bunch of challenges with that. You have to really set it up in a way that people understand why white people should speak to each other. and have their own spaces for dealing with racial equity, and also why people of color can use their own spaces, and even affinity groups within people of color, right? Because it's not all the same. But also like how to do that well to bring those conversations back together and make sure white folks are held accountable, and also aren't like using their privilege to kind of escape difficult conversations as well. So it's not something we totally figured out, but I think it's important work to break up into affinity groups, but also you have to be really intentional and thoughtful about it.
I just wanted to, something that you said, Hillary, made me think of something as well. And thinking about like the engagement piece, I think that it seems like that's been a challenge at points. I think making sure people feel like it's something they want to be involved in on top of all the other work sometimes feels challenging, especially in like the nonprofit world, where a lot of times people, because they're so invested in the work, feel overwhelmed or overworked or burnt out. Having to do additional work on top of just the direct service can sometimes feel challenging. And also people come with like different experiences or levels of understanding of political engagement and social justice issues. Some people, that's not what they want to be doing. And so I feel like for me, that's something that feels like it's like come up numerous times. And again, I think like the evolution of it has helped, but it's, you know, it always does come up.
I think that is a really great point, Joselina, that you're bringing up. I think one thing that could be helpful, at first I noticed that I didn't really explain what Learning Community Steering Committee was, and we've used it a lot. So I do want to clarify that the steering committee is a group of self-selected people. For the most part, these are people who have agreed to take extra time in order to hold space for learning community. But this conversation around engagement has been a challenge over the years, because we had to come to a point at DreamYard where we first explicitly said that we were an organization working towards being anti-racist. And we had to be explicit about centering the conversation on race, where we know that there are so many things that we could be working for and against in the world that we live in. There's so many layers to how we identify and how we experience the world. Once we came to that agreement that that would be our focus and our commitment, then we had to help people understand that if you are working at DreamYard, that this is the mission and this is how this is the lens through which we do our work. And it is an extra ask for some people. And for some people, it feels like a part of the work. And there's no way to know where we might land on that spectrum. But the challenge has led us, especially the leadership team, which consists of the directors and associate directors at DreamYard who supervise a team and who run programs and have a responsibility of leading in the organization, to really start to think about how we make sure that we're embedding the work across the board, that it's not a side conversation and it's not only at the staff meeting that the work is being done. So that challenge with learning community then became a reflection of what the challenge is for the organization in actuality. Well, who are the people we're hiring? Who are the people we're promoting? Who are the people we're retaining? If those people are actually not able to uphold some of these commitments, then they might not be the right fit for the organization. And that's a really hard conversation to have. We've actually lost people along the way, and we've gained some really capable people as well. So yeah, it's that conversation is real. We talked about how learning community went from, if you're interested, come to this conversation, to no, if you work here, you've got to be a part of it. And to try to compromise and understand that, you know, we don't want things to be labor intensive for people of color, especially who often end up doing this work. We had to really think about how we created a sense of agency within that, and give people the opportunity to choose how they enter the work, but also understand that you had to choose something. Not being a part was no longer an option, which at first, I think in the beginning, my understanding is there were a lot of places where you can opt out of being involved in a way that now that feels like it would be looked down upon and almost not even an option at all. Like you saying, no, thank you, I don't want to do learning community this month would not go well at DreamYard. So it's been an interesting journey and an interesting development. I think we still struggle with what's right, because you can't make people believe in a cause and you can't make people be passionate about something, but at the same time, you want to be able to uphold the integrity of the commitment that the organization has made.
And I think to add on to that a little bit, how we are kind of building those conversations into our hiring practice as well has been something that we have been talking about as an organization, in terms of being very upfront and clear that that is in fact a very important part of our work, before folks, even go through all the way through that process. And I think something else that came up for me, Rajeeyah and Hillary, when you were speaking, was around the way that this is held by the organization, and something that is both an important thing that has come up over my time here, as well as something that has been a challenge, but the ways in which the organization prioritizes learning community. And I think that is something that we know to be important, but also at times struggle with. I feel like there have been times where we really, it feels like we're all in it and all committed to it, and there are times when it has felt like less of a priority. And so how you maintain that kind of balance and commitment to the work, I think, is a really important piece, and at times challenge.
I think for me, both personally and also as an organization, it's been really interesting to see, like, there's moments where it feels like we're making big wins and really changing things and like changing structures in the organization and people are changing. And then like something will happen and it'll be like, whoa, like 5 steps back. I'm like, wait, how did that just happen when we just talked about all this other stuff over here in learning community? And I think just having been a part of the work so long, and also seeing in like spaces, anti-racist work outside of DreamYard, it's always a cycle, and it's always, moving forward, moving back, moving forward. And sometimes you come way back around to where you started, and that feels so frustrating, but you are building on the work always. And new people are going to come in, people are going to leave, you're going to lose expertise, you're going to gain expertise. And then also just like views change on all of this. So being patient is something I work on with that, and staying on my growing edge, and knowing that this is for me personally and for the organization and for everyone else, is a lifelong journey and long-standing work. And it's gonna take time, and we're gonna also have to learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, I would say a huge thing for me is the modeling piece. I think that we have to be active. And what I've noticed over the years, no matter who's been involved, I've seen the transformation in staff. Like I've seen, even if we're not exactly at the same place, I've seen like our grant writers jumping in and getting deeper into work and understanding, because they're actually experiencing the art making with us. And so when you have that experience, it deepens what you're going to write about, and really understanding what we're doing, how active we are in the community. And I think being on the direct service side, maybe I have a different perspective, but I have noticed a collective shift with us being able to really model and do what we say we're doing, and asking our teaching artists, asking our communities, asking our teachers to jump in and do this work. It's very helpful for us to actually have experienced it, firsthand with each other before we ask others to do it.
I would agree with that. The being an organization so connected and rooted in the idea of education, and being in partnership with institutions that are geared towards educating people. I think it's important that we remember what it's like to be a learner and be in the position of learning. So I absolutely agree with you, Lisa. I would say something in addition to that I am still learning about is I look at DreamYard, and our staff has expanded significantly since I started. And now we're at about 30 people on the administrative staff, so that our learning community meeting could consist of 30 people, about 8 of those being the steering committee. You could assume or imagine how different each of those 30 people are. And we can think about how little practice we get out in the world around talking about race and facing issues of systemic oppression, and being able to look at the whole picture. We don't get a lot of practice out in the world to do that together, and then to come together with 30 different people with 30 different experiences and try to do that in 3 hours per month is quite a challenge. And it can be very emotional, and it can be very draining. And what I have learned is, for me, it's still urgent and important and worth it. There have been many points of frustration for me personally. I think, unfortunately, people who are in positions of privilege, whatever that privilege may be associated with, can always default back to that privilege when they get tired. And it becomes really clear that you don't have that privilege when you can't, right? So for me, I've started to really understand in a different way what self-care means, because there have been many moments where I wanted to retreat and wanted to take a break, but I didn't have the privilege to do that. And it's not like a lowest me, oh, my world is crumbling, I have no privilege. It's more of an understanding of, that's why I have to take care of myself. That is why I have to be able to think about the long game and sustaining myself, and understanding that there might come times where the truth is, this system is not built for me to make it, for me to thrive, for me to win. And we're a part of an organization that's a part of a system. We're an institution, we're a nonprofit. We work with the Department of Education. A lot of our partners are rooted in the same institutions that we're learning were built on the oppression of people, the people who look like the people who run our organization on the ground. And it becomes really clear that we each have our own responsibility in this work, to ourselves and then to each other. And if we cannot first be accountable to ourselves and what we're doing to perpetuate the problem, or what we're lacking in order to stop it, if we can't come to a clear understanding of that first, then the work that we do together really is not useful at all. And I think there have been some harsh realities of, wow, it felt so good to talk about all of that and get deep, but it doesn't mean anything if we can't each be self-accountable. And I try to take that for myself rather than judging other people, because again, that would get me nowhere either. But it can be a hard lesson to face. It doesn't always feel good to understand the truth, but it also has to happen. You have to unearth it in order for us to progress.
Seeing the transformation in folks, and that being a really important, not observation, but something to be aware of, I guess, and something that has really, made real for me the importance of leading with love in this work, and how we care for each other and hold each other. And likewise, the ways in which, like, this work can't just be held by the steering committee, and it can't just be held by one person on the steering committee. Like, if that person's not in the room, it can't fall apart, right? And so the importance of how we kind of share in this work and hold this work, and how we, to Rajeeyah's point of when folks default back to their positions of privilege, like how we push back and how we remind ourselves of the commitments that we have made, and the importance of this work, even when it's hard and even when it's uncomfortable, because we have to. And I think that is what's coming up for me.
Something I've been thinking about a lot, and in particular because of the other folks that are on LC Learning Community Steering Committee with me, is how, as an organization and as a staff, we're building relationships and trust, and also how that ripples out with the folks that we work with, whether it's a school partner or our community members. I think for me, I'm someone who's very well trained in white dominant culture and white ways of being, and I often try to intellectualize things, and I'm like, I need to know more of the history. I need to learn the right way to do things. And we do a lot of that, talking about history and context, but then sometimes I forget about the relationships and how I'm building trust with the people I work with every day. And it's not just like checking off the box of like, oh, I read this book and I get this badge for that. But it's like, do I see you? Do I ask you how you're doing? Am I listening to your story? Am I sharing my stories and being authentic with you? And I think that's something we're always working on here, and I'm working on personally, that it's not just about, checking off the boxes to say that I'm doing racial equity work, but that I am really connecting with other folks and sort of unlearning that wasn't important in the workplace for a while. And so I appreciate my colleagues who have built those relationships with me and continue to help me that. I think that's a really important part of our racial equity work.
I don't know what the future of LC will be, but my hope is, and it has always been, it continues to be, that we can see it as an opportunity to change like our day-to-day interactions with each other. And I think this speaks to what you were talking about, Hillary, when you say relationships. I think we are in a world where in nonprofit, you have to have a mission. It has to be really clear. People have to see it. It has to be on the website. Do you have your core values and bullet points so people can repeat it? And all of that makes a lot of sense to me for the most part. But at the same time, it makes no sense at all to have all of this beautiful language about anti-racism and anti-oppression and intersectionality if the people who are working in the building from day to day don't experience equity. And as a person of color, specifically as a Black person, I experience anti-Blackness everywhere I go, all around. I could pick out things that feel like they are just not for me or who I am. And I could say the same is true within DreamYard. And even though there are moments where I feel like, wow, no other place that I've worked at has been allowed me to be as honest about my experience as DreamYard has, I could also say that just like so many places that I've worked at, there's still so much work to be done and so much still to be uncovered and I don't know, for lack of a better word, exposed and addressed, that I hope that we can start to see that it's not the big gestures, like the grand finale, the beautiful pictures and the highlight in the, in the news or the conference day that we do that everybody around the country gets to see. That to me is not at the heart of the work. The heart of the work is that as a Black woman, I feel seen and I feel valued at work on a Monday, on a Tuesday at 2 p.m., like in the middle of the day, not just when I show up to speak on behalf of the organization in front of 25 other organizations that represent arts education in the country. I want to believe that even behind closed doors, when no one's watching, that the decisions that are being made are made with in mind that it takes working against what the default is. It's not enough to just do what everybody is doing and to go along with the program, but there has to be extra energy and to put into, did we think about the Black people who work here? And I'm really excited that we have the Equity Prime to help us do that. And my hope for the documentation work that me and Hillary are doing to offer this resource page online will help others see that work as well. That we're documenting the things that aren't normally seen. It's not just the beautiful artwork that the students did at the end that had such a powerful message. It's also, how did we on this call experience our work day today? And how did we get to a place where we feel like, no, this is good for me as much as it is for the other people here? And if we're not there, how do we get there? So my hope is that we can start to look at the small things that make up the whole experience.
I definitely see a lot or experience a lot of the realities that you had mentioned, and like the importance of being able to like bring each other into conversations, hard conversations that I haven't seen in other spaces. And like, while things could still feel like there's so much more that we could be doing, the intention around like having those hard conversations is something that I appreciate, even though they're not easy or like, clear cut. I agree in that I appreciate that, the ability the space to have those conversations. And I also like, in thinking about how LC has grown, I really appreciate the new iteration that we saw this past year around the racial justice projects, the RJPs, and like really digging deep into like what are the things that need to change. I think we've been able to like talk a lot about the history, the realities, that are going on in our society, but like also including into that what needs to change is something that feels really good. So I look forward to that continuing to grow. And it seems like this might be a good place to wrap up. And I think also just like being able to know that like this isn't the end of this conversation or this work. This work is going to continue. And I look forward to continuing this conversation with all of y'all and other nonprofits and activists and artists who are also doing this hard work. So thank you all for sharing your experiences and time. Thank you to our listeners. We hope that folks are able to find some value in hearing our stories, and hope that folks can take something back to their own personal and professional work.
And thank you all again. If you'd like to hear more details about any or all of the things that you heard today, please feel free to check us out on our website, on a resource page. That's dreamyard.com/resources. And we have many things on our site that you can check out, more about learning community, racial equity resources, our student work, and institutional support. So again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.